Fearing sanctions and a strangling naval blockade of its oil interests by its biggest rival, the Chinese dragon made seismic shifts in its oil policy. Hundreds of millions of Chinese moved from villages to cities, and when they moved, they started making things, not just Temu stuff, that is, t shirts, toys, and tables, but they also started making semiconductors, solar panels, new port facilities, highways, railways, pipelines, and fiber optics. And to make all of this, they needed oil. To make factories, building infrastructure, and building entire cities, you need oil. And like any growing economy, China steadily imported crude oil between 2011 to 2020. But from 2020 to 2024, China's imports from the US either remained steady or even dropped in some years. So for the past 15 years, China has been on a silent but very visible push to become the renewable energy Goliath of the world. And this ambition stems from a very critical vulnerability that the Chinese identified. See, China is world's number one importer of crude oil. It imports about 11.8 million barrels per day and it consumes about 14 to 15 million barrels per day. This is where the Chinese leadership began to acknowledge the possibility of the threat that the US posed to its energy needs. If the US decided one day it wanted to harm China, it could choke off its supply. And although there are other ways of delivering oil, like moving it by the rail or by pipeline, most oil is delivered by ship. And unfortunately for China, it gets 90% of its oil by ships. And that is a big problem for China. American Navy, one of the best navies in the world, with its sheer size and number of US military bases around the world, US and its network of allies and its military bases can easily strangle China's oil imports. For example, in the South China Sea, US routinely deploys aircraft carriers, destroyers, and other Navy vessels and warships in the area. In addition to that, it operates a dozen military bases in that area. And consider this narrow waterway running between Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. It is the main shipping channel between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. It connects oil exporters in the Middle East to oil importers in China. And it is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. And in the imminent Taiwan conflict, if the US decides to block Chinese oil through the Malacca Strait, it would block almost all Chinese oil, therefore cutting off the Chinese lifeline, the Chinese industry, right in front of their eyes, in their own front yard. China would be helpless, feeling almost numb and lifeless, given they are already surrounded by an hostile neighbor, which is also a key strategic US ally, India, and other US allies in the region. So the Chinese have been paying close attention to this Malacca dilemma since 2001 and 2002. Because America, which has an exceedingly large naval presence in the region, could basically choke off the Chinese in a moment's notice from the resource which is so crucial to them. A big worry for the Chinese government is, can it reliably get these imports into the country without any risk of intervention or interception? A US naval blockade would be seen as so damaging and devastating to the China's interests that it would amount to an act of war. Chinese President Xi Jinping even said this a few years ago. As a major manufacturing power, China has to secure its energy supply in its own hands. Analyzing the gravity of the situation, China started rethinking the use of oil entirely. The Chinese leadership started transitioning from an oil economy to an electric economy. With crude oil, you can make all kinds of things, from plastic to asphalt, and many more in between. But for China, the primary use of crude oil was to make fuel. And for a very simple reason, because no country in the world has more cars than China. And the Chinese government heavily subsidizes the EV industry. Whether you are buying the car or you are building the car, providing the electricity or assembling the battery, everyone in China is entitled to government money and assistance. The EV strategy has followed, not preempted, the investment in renewable energy. In 1965, China relied almost entirely on coal to generate electricity, but over time, oil became more and more important. But now, hydro, nuclear, wind, and solar, they've cut dramatically the need of oil and coal, thus significantly reducing the reliance on non-renewable sources like oil and coal. Today, China generates more wind and solar power than any other country on the planet. And China is also leveraging its hold of rare earth elements to completely insulate itself from outside interference. Like the magnets that help convert spin into electricity are made using these rare earth elements. So China is reducing its reliance on foreign supply chains that are vulnerable to intervention and interception, while also producing more and more things domestically that are needed to produce renewable energy, thereby protecting its interests from both fronts so it doesn't have to rely on any foreign player for anything, thereby bringing itself closer to its ambitions of energy independence. From the very beginning, China's thought process was to let's first build the supply chain for the energy, then get the renewable energy construction going, then move over to the EV capability, and this entire enterprise was very intelligently sequenced, and the Chinese government has played a crucial role in building that EV capability. The Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington figures over the last 15 years, China has spent almost 200 billion US dollars supporting the electric vehicle industry, and it has also significantly subsidized this industry. For the last 10 years, China has exempted qualifying EVs from a 10% sales tax, which could have otherwise amounted to thousands of dollars per car. In addition to this, there were also consumer subsidies, manufacturer incentives, priority for R&D funding, preferential lotteries for handing out license plates, all of which helped the industry survive and thrive at lower and lower price points. Chinese EV company BYD recently overtook Tesla to become the number one selling electric automaker in the world. Today, 7 out of 10 EVs globally are made in China. In 2015, 331,000 EVs were sold in China, but last year that number reached 12.9 million sales. So China has taken a really interesting journey from infrastructure, critical minerals, domestic renewable energy production, EVs and exports, and in the process, China has also worked to circumvent and weaken America's authority in the global oil trade. Despite the web of sanctions, Russia has continued shipping and selling its crude oil to China. More than 20% of China's crude oil last year was sanctioned oil. That means buying from countries that US tries to block. Like from Venezuela, 268,000 barrels per day, from Russia, 821,000 barrels per day, and from Iran, 1.4 million barrels per day. What the Chinese have been doing is importing cheap oil, refining it, and then selling it in Asia, and they have made a lot of money doing it. China has also been busy building a stockpile of oil. When oil prices are low, Chinese would increase their imports and they will dump some of that oil into giant storage tanks that they are constantly building. And in addition to that, in 2019, China's national oil companies rolled out their 7-year action plan for increasing exploration and production of oil and natural gas in China.